In today's video, I'm talking about going into when I started in the visual effects industry and going into a male-dominated industry. How that, me stepping in as a female, like how I felt I was perceived, how men did perceive me, but then in the end, how that being seen, how I was being seen, actually maybe gave me an advantage as well. So when I started in the visual effects industry, I went in as a woman into this male-dominated industry. And I mean, when I even went to college, the attitude of certain professors that were men was like, oh, you know, this you can't do, you know, or it was kind of this feeling of, oh, you're a woman, you can't figure this stuff out. And one of the things was like, I wanted to learn some programming, you know, because here I am going into a visual effects field, which is all computer, and it's around math and programming. And I had programming actually prior to college, but one of the professors was just like, oh, that's too difficult for you. You know, so here I was coming out of a university where even professors were kind of like, oh, that's too much for you. And I was like, why? Why is it too much for me? You know? And anyway, I then stepped into the industry and I also had this feeling of, oh, I'm a woman in this industry and there's many more men than women here. And it's like I had to work 10 times harder to be seen as equal to the men. At least that's how I felt, you know, like many times I would even look at other women and have already a bias of, oh, the women don't know as much as the men. And it was just part of the culture of like what we were brought up with, of believing women don't know as much as men or can't do as much, you know, logically, whatever, which is totally false and totally incorrect. But we have this preconceived ideas and conditioning that we've been brought up with. I mean, thankfully, over the years, it has changed, and I see in some areas that some companies I've worked with have had equal men to women, you know, like hired, and we don't get treated any differently. But when I started out, it definitely was, and in some of these really big feature film visual effects studios, like I would be in a department of 100 to 120 artists, and that's just in one of the departments. And there, you know, like 100 to 120 artists, and there was maybe 6 to 10 females, and the rest are all males. So it's like this big pool that you're fighting against the male, you know, like we have to fit in and conform in a way to these certain standards. So when I mentioned like, how did that give me an unfair advantage? In a way, it was a disadvantage because I had to fight 10 times harder to be seen, or feel like I had to, you know, fight 10 times harder to be seen. But in the end, I fought 10 times harder, which then made me stand out. If that makes sense, you know, where it's like guys could come in and just do their work and then leave for the day. And they maybe didn't have the added pressure of like, oh, as a woman, I'm actually not going to be seen. So that means I have to work harder to, you know, be equal, just even see myself as equal to the guys there. And so often I did fight harder, I did work more, and at a certain point, I was working at a studio. It was about 10 years into my career, and the studio had somewhere around 120 artists, and then there were 6 of us that were females. And the 6 of us, we would do lunches together and hang out. You know, it was this nice little cohesive group of females that was like, oh yeah, we were all in the industry for long enough now that we had to fight those kind of battles. And I say battles of like, we're women in this industry and we are not seen, so we have to work harder, and we do that. And this group of us had done that. And at a certain point, we discovered that we had all been asked by supervisors if we would be a lead or a supervisor on different shows that we're on. So all 6 of us at one point or another had been asked. And so I say that because we had worked so hard and we had always gone above and beyond to do our work so that we could even feel like we were just seen as equal to these guys. But in doing that, we actually kind of surpassed a lot of the everyday artist as well, So like we were going above and beyond constantly to feel like we were seen, but in the end, it actually, in a way, was kind of our unfair advantage because we had to push and push and push. And that then made us stand out a little bit more. Not to say that we didn't already stand out as women, but it also added that, oh, these are good artists. They know what they're doing. And in a way, like I said, we had to push that extra little bit to show that we knew what we were doing. If we just did the average, we probably wouldn't have even been seen, and we wouldn't have, stayed on or kept our work, or we maybe even would have been looked down on, like, oh, that's the girl over there that doesn't really know what she's doing, even if we were doing equally to what the other guys were doing, So there is a disadvantage that we had to struggle and fight with, and it's still around, it's still seen, and people still have this preconceived ideas that if a woman goes into a technical field, are they going to be as smart or as intelligent as a man? And yes, women are just as smart as men. And yet there was these things and conditions that we were brought up with in our cultures, in our societies, that says, women cannot have the same intelligence as men. And it was like an underlying thing. No one said it, but you kind of all believed it in some way or another. Anyway, so I share this story as even though it may have been a disadvantage that, it's like I'm not seen as equal to men, so I had to work harder to be seen as equal. It also gave me an advantage of I got a work ethic that pushed. Like I really pushed to be seen as equal. And in the end, I worked 10 times harder because I just wanted to be seen as equal to these guys. So many industries, not just the visual effects industry, is male dominated, and in many industries as well, I can believe and see that there is still going to be these stereotypes and still going to be these thoughts around women. And so I share it as well to not just say, hey, these are our preconceived ideas, this is the society and the culture that we've been brought up with, but also for women that step into this place, how do you see yourself? Because for me, for so long, I did not believe in myself as being equal to men. And I believed I had to work 10 times harder to even be equal to them. So it's like looking within as well as a woman to be like, oh, how do I see myself? And yes, men can change their thoughts too, but it also is within us as ourselves as women in a male-dominated field or even within the female field of how do you see yourself? And do you see yourself as equal to others around you? Do you have to work harder, to be seen? What is it inside of you that is, pushing or driving you, making you feel not good enough, or making you feel you have to work harder to gain respect or to gain being seen by others? So I'm AmyC with You Finding You. I'm an intuitive and transformational coach, and I help individuals step into their authenticity, into who they want to be in themselves, and not having to seek outside for validation or approval from others, but actually stepping into it in themselves. So thank you for joining me today. If you are enjoying and getting value out of this series, do click that like, share, and subscribe button below. And thank you again. I'll see you in the next video.